I'm Doug Boynton, and this is WHRO's Weekly Edition, highlighting the week's news and stories happening across the region. We have some great stories in this week's program. Virginia Beach residents have scored a win. A federal judge ruled that they can reopen cases against the city about local voting districts. A new project at the York River watershed aims to focus on water quality, wildlife, and several other conservation efforts. And this week, WHRO kicked off its year-long project, chronicling America's 250th anniversary. Our first segment focuses on the demographics of Revolutionary-era Norfolk. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. Environmental advocates say Virginia needs to curb pollution that makes local beaches unsafe for swimming. WHRO's Catherine Hafner breaks down the dangers.
WHRO Beach in Hampton was sunny and peaceful Tuesday as beachgoers ventured into gentle waves. There's nothing wrong with the water today, but
twice this year already, this beach has been closed due to high levels of bacteria.
That's Ellie Wilson with Environment Virginia. The nonprofit says 85% of Virginia's beaches tested positive for harmful bacteria at least once last summer, including 16 times at WHRO. This contamination can cause skin rashes and gastrointestinal illness. Wilson says one big cause is when rain washes away stuff like dog poop and fertilizer.
A lot of our infrastructure is old. We don't have the right tools in place to prevent the runoff from getting into our waterways.
She says you might want to avoid swimming right after it rains just to be safe, and check the beach for posted warning signs. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Farmers across the area are frustrated by the use of a new crop on prime farmland. It's not corn, it's not rice, it's solar panels. WHRO's Nick McNamara shares their concerns.
Effective last month, the rules generally require new solar farms to provide perpetual conservation easements equal to the amount of land disturbed by the project if the farm produces less than 150 megawatts of power and impacts more than 10 acres of prime soil. The amount of land required for an easement can be reduced if developers take steps to minimize soil damage or benefit the local ecosystem. They can also pay a fee for the state to make the easement. Virginia Beach farmer John Cromwell says every acre in an easement means there was a loss of farmland, which he says isn't coming back once it's gone.
What, we going to call God and tell him to make us another planet?
Cromwell's not optimistic the rules will reverse the trend of farmland loss in the Commonwealth. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
The Navy is looking at whether more private wells will be tested for forever chemicals around Naval Air Station Oceana. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh has more.
A defense official says the Navy expects to have a decision on further well testing around Oceana by the end of summer. One private well at Oceana was offered an alternative source of drinking water under an earlier round of testing. The group of chemicals known as PFAS are used in firefighting foam as well as a number of consumer products. They do not break down easily in the environment. In 2024, the Department of Defense adopted a more strict standard for the amount of forever chemicals allowed in drinking water. Hundreds of military facilities around the country are being reevaluated. Locally, the Navy has begun sampling private drinking wells near NSA Hampton Roads Northwest Annex and Naval Auxiliary Landing Fields Fentress. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
A federal judge says Virginia Beach residents may reopen their original voting rights case against the city about local voting districts. WHRO's Michelle Hankerson reports.
United States District Judge Raymond Jackson says the city misled the court and the residents who filed the original lawsuit, which claimed an old at-large voting system diluted minority voting power. Latasha Holloway and Georgia Allen, the residents named in the suit, agreed to put the case on hold as long as the city implemented a more fair district-based election system. Virginia Beach has held elections under that system, but it hasn't been formalized in the city charter. The city abandoned efforts to get the needed state approval to do that, Judge Jackson wrote. Plus, according to Jackson, the city's plan to put the issue to vote this November doesn't honor the agreement made when the lawsuit was put on hold. Michelle Hankerson, WHRO News.
The Trump administration is in the process of forcing transgender troops out of the military. It's given service members the option to self-identify and receive separation benefits, or take the risk of being outed and go through an involuntary separation. Andrew Dyer of the American Homefront Project talks with a Navy sailor who came forward as transgender and is now seeing his military career fall apart.
Senior Chief Operations Specialist Ben Kibler's been in the Navy 13 years. This year, he was admitted into a highly selective Navy officer program. But instead of planning for his Navy future, days later, he learned he's being forced out.
Yeah, it's just really hard. It's devastating. So I was selected for a commission on Monday, and then this came out on Wednesday.
You told me you've been in the Navy for 13 years and that you're a senior chief. And is that an unusual kind of career trajectory in your rating?
Yes, I was fast-tracked. A lot of that is because my leadership saw things in myself and gave me opportunities because they believed in me and they believed that I could accomplish what they were asking of me.
Kibler's Navy record backs that up. Early in his career, one evaluation said Kibler was ranked number 1 out of 60 other sailors in his rank. Others praised him for exceptional leadership and, quote, unwavering loyalty toward mission success. He was even on track for promotion.
To achieve that and not really be able to relish it, and not because of, I didn't do anything wrong. It's not because of a lack of performance. I actually overperform.
Kibler spent the first decade of his Navy career living as a woman, the gender he was assigned at birth. In 2020, he came out as trans.
It got to a point that I felt like I wasn't living authentically with who I am, and because of that, I wasn't living in line with my values, and I didn't feel like I was living in alignment with the Navy's values either. The Navy's core values are honor, courage, and commitment, right? I had been going to therapy specifically to deal with that for about 2.5, almost 3 years, before I made any kind of medical decision with my doctors.
But was this some radical therapist medical setting, or was this Navy medical?
This is Navy medical, yeah. I did everything through the Navy.
President Trump in January signed an executive order saying transgender troops, quote, cannot satisfy the rigorous standards necessary for military service. Speaking at Fort Bragg, North Carolina recently, Trump said he was restoring the spirit of the armed forces.
No soldier ever volunteered for the Army to be lectured about transgender diversity or inclusion. You don't want to hear that. Transgender for everybody. We don't do that. America's patriots joined the Army to kick down doors, storm beaches, kill terrorists, and win America's wars. That's what we want. And that's what you want.
But Kibler said that after he'd gone through a transition and began identifying as a different gender, it didn't affect his work in the Navy.
Everybody could see that I was just a member of the team, and then I'm pulling my weight, and then I'm trying my best the same way everybody else is, and that's what's respected. Nobody really cares. We have bigger things to worry about than, what gender somebody identifies as.
Kibler's ship changed its home port last month from San Diego to Japan. He's now at another local command, waiting for the Navy to sign off on his separation from the military. Though the Navy officially is calling the separation voluntary, he had planned to spend another decade or more as a sailor. So now Kibler's going through another type of transition, leaving the military.
It's really hard. It's scary because, so much of my identity is being a sailor. I joined the Navy when I was 23. I'm going to be 37 this year. That's a long time. I believe in my country. I love my country. I want to serve my country. And I think that that's really what needs to be taken away is from all of this is these are just people just like any other people who are just trying to do their jobs and trying to make the best out of everything.
2 lawsuits are working their way through federal courts, but the military transgender ban is moving ahead. Although the troops are supposed to get honorable discharges, officers are reportedly also receiving discharge codes that tell potential employers their national security risks. In San Diego, I'm Andrew Dyer.
Still ahead on Weekly Edition, Congressman Rob Wittman is facing competition for the seat in Virginia's 1st District. We'll have more on his challengers, but first, Virginia's Attorney General says he won't enforce the state's ban on so-called ex-gay therapy for minors. The notice comes after a consent decree was announced between the state and a Front Royal County counselor who wanted to engage in that practice. Brad Kuttner with WVTF has more.
For 5 years, Virginia's children struggling over gender confusion and sexuality have been left without professional help.
That's Victoria Cobb with the Family Foundation of Virginia, announcing a new agreement with the Virginia Attorney General's office that would block any enforcement of the Commonwealth's 5-year-old ban on so-called ex-gay therapy for minors. According to the decree, agreed to by Attorney General Jason Miyares' office in early June, the ban violates religious freedom protections in Virginia's Constitution. But Narissa Rahaman with Equality Virginia said the practice has been discredited by every major mental health organization and is considered fraud in some states for a reason.
This is state-licensed mental health professionals that want to abuse their position of trust to pressure LGBTQ youth into trying to change a part of themselves that cannot be changed.
Senate Majority Leader Scott Surville authored the 2020 ban, which got bipartisan support. He argued Miyares has a history of pushing bad law, and Tuesday's announcement is par for the course.
He basically told the Department of Corrections they didn't have to release certain people. The state just ended up paying $1.8 million for his legal advice. He told Governor Youngkin he had the right to withdraw from Reggie. A circuit court judge told him he was wrong. This is just one more example of that. And Virginians ought to really ask whether this Attorney General is competent to do his job.
Miyares' office did not return requests for comment. In Richmond, I'm Brad Kuttner.
Conservation efforts are kicking off on the York River watershed. WHRO's Catherine Hafner reports that it takes a wide-ranging look at water quality, wildlife, and recreation.
The State of the York report is the first to evaluate the sprawling ecosystem in 25 years. The watershed includes 3 river basins stretching from Yorktown and Gloucester north to Lake Anna and the Mattapony River. Circe Gonzalez helped lead the effort with the Chesapeake Bay National Estuary and Research Reserve in Virginia. She says the population has grown in the area, but a majority of the land cover is still natural.
And that cover is essentially protecting us from ourselves because it's mitigating any damage that is coming from development.
Development does pose challenges moving forward, though, as does erosion. Both have already contributed to significant losses of wetlands. The report says the York watershed has lost more than 400 football fields of tidal marsh since 1970, and that data only goes through 2009. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Contradicting their passion, amateur radio enthusiasts gathered across the continent over the weekend for the hobby's open house event. WHRO's Nick McNamara reported that story.
The annual Amateur Radio Field Day is, for some, a day of intense competition for getting the most radio contacts over 24 hours. But for Peninsula clubs...
We're not about winning. We're just having fun.
That's Chris Hausman, president of the Hampton Public Service Team, one of 4 clubs that set up behind Northampton Christian Church in Hampton to showcase the hobby to the community. The primary focus for local clubs, emergency preparedness, rapport building, and recruitment, especially of young enthusiasts. 17-year-old James Wright was part of the new crop of operators out last weekend.
The more people that get involved with ham radio, the more it'll get out there. I've made contact with someone in China over ham radio, and I just thought that was so cool because that was like a 7,000 mile away contact.
Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Another person has jumped into the race against Congressman Rob Whitman in Virginia's 1st District. Emily Winstead reports for WHRO.
Democrat Andrew Luchetti, a Virginia civil rights attorney, has thrown his hat into the ring alongside 2 additional candidates to challenge Whitman. Chesterfield County Court Clerk Amanda Pohl and Richmond-based community leader Lisa Veternikova-Kana previously announced runs for the seat. Virginia's 1st District was won by Trump in 2024 by 5.1 points, but investing in Luchetti may mean Virginia Democrats are hopeful they can flip the district. Whitman has served in Congress since 2008 and was re-elected in 2024 with 56% of the vote. The district has traditionally supported Republican candidates. Emily Winstead, WHRO News.
A unique piece of history went on sale on the 4th of July in Philadelphia. It's a letter from Thomas Jefferson to the governor of Virginia explaining his views on the right to bear arms. WVTF's Sandy Hausman spoke with the seller. She filed this report.
Thomas Jefferson signed the Declaration of Independence alongside another leader of the time, Benjamin Harrison V. He was serving as governor of Virginia, and the two corresponded often about the important issues of the time. Shortly after the American Revolution, Jefferson wrote to Harrison about a subject that remains controversial today. Here's collector Nathan Rabb.
You see sort of the spark of liberty taking root in Europe in general. And the purpose of these movements is to fight for democracy over monarchy. And one of the things that these people want is the right to bear arms, which is, of course, central to the American experience.
The Second Amendment did not yet exist, but Jefferson was adamant that people have the right to defend their country.
You see the echoes of that Lexington Concord moment.
Rab, who deals in rare documents, bought this one from a private collector who paid $5,500 for it in 1982. Today, the purchase price is set at $90,000.
The value of a letter is based on the person who signed it and the historical importance of the letter. Does the letter matter in the grand scheme of history? Those are the things that, over time, retain their value.
Rab says the market is strong. He expects major institutions and private collectors to check in from around the world. I'm Sandy Hausman.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
Lingerie and adult entertainment stores will have to get special use permits to operate in James City County. WHRO's Nick McNamara has more.
There aren't any of what the county zoning ordinance now defines as sexually oriented businesses in James City County. But the Board of Supervisors on Tuesday followed neighboring York County in amending its ordinances to differentiate adult-themed businesses and require any looking to open in James City County to apply for a special use permit, giving the county more scrutiny over if and where to approve one. York County changed its ordinance and rules for similar home-based businesses in January, following residents' opposition to a plan for an Adam and Eve franchise in late 2024. Virginia Beach leads the region in adult businesses with 10, according to a November 2024 inventory in the county's briefing documents. Newport News is second with 8. Portsmouth, Norfolk, and Chesapeake have 6 locations each. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Changes to federal food assistance rules could have a dramatic influence here in Virginia. Michael Pope from partner station WVTF explains why.
More than 100,000 lower-income Virginians could lose access to food assistance when new, more strict eligibility standards go into place. That's according to the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, which also estimates the cost to Virginia of maintaining the current benefits would be about $350 million a year. Here's Levi Gorin at the Commonwealth Institute.
Expanding red tape work reporting requirements ends up throwing a lot of families who are already working or who should be exempt because they have disabilities or they're elderly off of the help that they need.
It's not just individuals who will suffer. Cassie Edner at the Virginia Poverty Law Center says lower-income communities will also feel the pinch.
SNAP is also a lifeline during economic downturn. Every dollar that you spend in SNAP brings $1.50 to the local economy. So these cuts are going to harm Virginians, families, individuals that live in food deserts, and to our economy.
Cuts to SNAP, also sometimes called food stamps, will go into effect on October 1st, 2027. I'm Michael Pope.
Just over a year ago, Virginia closed 4 prisons run by the state. Part of President Donald Trump's budget bill includes billions in new funds for detaining those taken by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And in some places, that may mean reopening the old facilities. WVTF's Brad Kuttner reports that story.
At the end of the day, the federal dollars are there for a reason. And if we have facilities that can go to work, we should make them available.
That's Governor Glenn Youngkin when asked if the 4 prisons Virginia closed last summer should be turned into ICE detention facilities. The state prisons were closed due to staffing issues and a decrease in the number of people incarcerated in the Commonwealth. But the Trump administration's One Big Beautiful Bill almost tripled ICE's budget, including $45 billion for new ICE detention facilities. A handful of closed, privately run prisons in other states have since been reopened for ICE, and while Youngkin thinks deportations to other countries might reduce the need for detainment, he's not one to shy away from opportunity. Details on how the $45 billion could trickle down into new detention facilities are still being worked out. In Richmond, I'm Brad Kuttner.
A New York State University dedicated a center for the late General Gregg, just weeks after his name was removed from an Army fort in Virginia. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh has more.
Excelsior University dedicated Lieutenant General Arthur J. Gregg University Center. and awarded him the President's Medal Wednesday. He was a trustee before his death in 2024. Greg's name was removed from the recently renamed Fort Lee. University President David Scable.
Personally, I was disappointed. I thought that it was a wonderful tribute to a man who truly had an incredible impact on the armed services.
Greg was the first black three-star general in the Army. Along with Colonel Charity Adams, his name was removed from Fort Lee as part of the Trump administration's effort to restore the names of 9 bases originally named for Confederate generals. Greg went to high school in Newport News. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
This week, WHRO began airing Revolution Revisited, America at 250. The project chronicles America's semi-quincentennial through the people and events that shaped Hampton Roads and the country. The first segment breaks down the demographics of Revolutionary-era Norfolk.
Ports, plantations, and rising tensions. Southeastern Virginia was a crucible of change as the Revolution loomed.
Revolution Revisited, America at 250, chronicling America's semi-quincentennial through the people, actions, and events that shaped our country.
By the 1700s, Virginia's Tidewater region flourished. Its population surpassed 100,000, driven by fertile land, deep harbors, and growing towns. To the west, Williamsburg stood as the center of governance and education, where a young Thomas Jefferson studied. To the south, Norfolk thrived as a bustling port. To the east, Princess Anne County's fertile fields fueled the colonial economy. Between them, communities spread, from the eastern shore to the Dismal Swamp and across today's Middle Peninsula. By 1775, Norfolk had become the 8th largest city in North America and was strategically vital. 40% of colonial exports passed through the Chesapeake Bay, with Norfolk as a key link to the Atlantic world. Ethnically diverse, but deeply divided, Norfolk's population included British merchants, enslaved Africans, nearly 40% of Virginia's populace, free black artisans, and remnants of indigenous communities. A wealthy merchant class, loyal to the crown, dominated politics, making Norfolk a British stronghold just as colonial loyalties were fracturing. As tensions rose, Norfolk stood at a volatile crossroads, economically vital, socially divided, and loyal to the British crown. That allegiance would soon make it a target. The battles to follow would reshape the Tidewater region and signal that revolution had arrived.
This has been Revolution Revisited. To learn more about this and other events of the Revolutionary Age of America, visit whro.org/USA250.
Revolution Revisited airs Mondays at 7:31 on Morning Edition and at 4:32 on All Things Considered. Episodes are also available anytime at WHRO.org or the WHRO smartphone app. You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Nick McNamara, Catherine Hafner, Michelle Hankerson, Emily Winstead, and Steve Walsh. WVTF's Brad Kuttner, Sandy Hausman, and Michael Pope. Also Andrew Dyer with the American Homefront Project. Thanks as always to Connor Worley, who produced today's show. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed. You can get your news updates at WHRO.org, the WHRO smartphone app, and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.